We interrupt this podcast for this brief public service announcement.
We interrupt this program for an important news announcement.
Hello, friends. We're coming at you from the land of the free and the home of the brave. Made in America matters, so we are asking all red-blooded, true blue, red, white, and blue Americans to support one of our favorite U.S. American manufacturing companies, Leupold Optics. Just ask yourself, have you America today? If not, consider purchasing some new state-of-the-art shades from America's Leupold Optics. Support American manufacturing with a new pair of 6 shades from LeupoldShop.com. And right now, when you use the code Brian2020, you get a free shirt of your choice from Leupold. Might I recommend one of my favorite shirts at Leupold? This glorious American Eagle shirt, because freedom. The American spirit shines brightest when our backs are against the wall. Through wars, natural disasters, and economic collapses, we've always shown a sense of grit and ingenuity when it's needed most. It's the same self-reliant spirit Fred Leupold had when he started his Oregon-based company 113 years ago. And it's what keeps the factory performing in Oregon today. Friends, support American manufacturing, because communism sucks. Stuck little headphone crimpage here.
All joking aside, folks, we over here at Gritty love working with Leupold Optics. If you're in the market for a new spotting scope or maybe some binoculars, please consider checking out Leupold Optics. Or, if you're looking for a new pair of sunglasses for the 2020 season, check out LeupoldShop.com and use the code Brian2020. Links are going to be in the description. Thanks, folks. Back to the show.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. And I'm joined today by Brad Hunt, intern Brad, and also elk caller Brad.
Yep.
And killer Brad. This will be an interesting podcast. Brad and I were just talking about how we grew up. You know, how did you get into hunting? How did I get into hunting?
Yep.
And we all kind of have a story of how we got into hunting and who introduced us to it. And the reason I got into that was I was reading this story from Field and Stream called Wild Friendships. And honestly, the last, I've gone through some family loss.
Yeah.
I went to, my uncle passed away and my cousin passed away. And I went to 2 funerals in the last 3 weeks. And I got to see a lot of family and a lot of friends, and we reconnected and we cried. It's got me thinking about life and a life well lived, and the outdoors is always that place where I go for relief and
serenity
and peace. And it's interesting. The article is from Field and Stream volume 125, and it's number 1. Did you know Field and Stream has been around for 125 years?
I had no idea. But I remember as a kid growing up,
I do too.
My grandparents always had it in their bathroom.
125 years. I got to do a little more digging on Field and Stream. It's gone a little woke sometimes, here and there. A little too progressive and liberal for me. I'm just an old school guy.
Yeah.
And I rebel at the changing times. I don't always think that the future is better than the past.
Right. Even as a young guy, I feel like I'm a little more old school.
Yeah.
As a young guy, but I don't really fit into it with the millennial age group that I'm acquainted with,
Right. It's interesting. I'm going to do a podcast here this week out of The Wilderness Warrior, the book by Douglas Brinkley, and it's about the strenuous life and how Theodore Roosevelt becomes president of the United States, or how he becomes vice president at first. It goes into some detail on his personality, and he really loved nature and science and all the stuff that was scientific about nature and being progressive about that.
Right.
But he really was not a fan of trading in the horse for the automobile.
Exactly.
If it was like a newfangled refrigerator, not so interested. A new car, no.
Yeah.
But if it was scientific in maybe a dam that would
All
stop
for it.
waterways and build more fisheries and all that, he's like all into it.
Yep.
So funny because he's just kicking and screaming into the progressive new world with inventions, with technology, and really clinging to the past. And he really does talk about, though, why it matters, why nature matters, and why the human soul needs it. In his writings about the strenuous life, he talks about that, you know, that we are better people, more connected, happier people when we spend time out in the outdoors,
Exactly.
dealing with cold and dealing with struggle and so on. I'm just going to jump right into this article. It's called Kindred Spirit, and it was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Takes a turn for the worse there about halfway
It
through.
does. Like, it gets a little dark here, but at the same time, it's real life. And I'm going to read it to you here in a minute. Before we do that, I want to remind you that you can support us by using the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops. And then also, if you're preparing for your archery season, go to Valkyrie Archery. Check out their broadheads. They've got the Blood Eagle, which screw into any, they're your standard broadhead. And then there's the Jaeger or the Jaeger broadheads that are the ones that I'm using with the center pin that are phenomenal. Everything that Valkyrie's coming out with is unreal. I've been using it for 3 years now. I've talked about it a lot, but you can save some money, save 5% if you use the code GRITTY at ValkyrieArchery.com. So check that out. And then I'm going backcountry hunting here real soon. I have bear hunts planned when I'm going backpacking, and I also have, I don't know, maybe New Zealand, maybe. This coronavirus has really hampered international travel.
It's not so much getting there.
It's getting back. I think New Zealand's going to ban travel here within the next week. So I don't think that's going to happen. We'll probably have to postpone it maybe to after bear season.
You're not in good enough shape anyway to do that hunt.
Now it looks like last time we almost died on like New Zealand's Southern Alps with, snow and treacherous. If you haven't seen the videos, they'll make you pucker.
Yep.
I never wanted to go back during that time of year and do that again. But it looks like we might end up going even later. We might be going to an even later. We went there. That was June, and that was New Zealand's dead winter in June. We might go there in July and give it a go. Why not? Adventure.
No.
Iced over. It was like Lord of the Rings.
That terrain of the Alps is like, because I've never been there, but just looking at the footage when it was being edited and stuff, like when your feet are making like 6-inch increments going uphill on video, it's steep.
I told Ryan when we were in the valley looking up, I was Lampers. I'm like, we're looking around. I go, of all the places you've been in the United States, where have you been that's similar to this? And he's like, nowhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere. And I got to admit, there's nothing like it that I've ever been to. I've been to mountain ranges like in the Eagle Caps where there's things like it, but just not, it's not as far as the eye can see.
Right. Everywhere.
It's not everywhere. And the waterways are way more intense than anything we have here.
Right.
It reminds you of something you've seen like from Storybook in Alaska, just because like Doll Sheep Country where it's just like flowing rock and dried in waterways. So
one of these days I'll get there.
The whole point of that was to talk about Heather's Choice backcountry meals, packaroons. Her packaroons are super lightweight, super nutritious, and delicious. And you save 15% if you use the code GRITTY at Heather's Choice. Get some cool packaroons. So her breakfast as well. So the thing about Heather's Choice is it's all very nutritional. None of it's injected with hormones. You're talking about salmon, wild caught salmon. It's the best you can get, really. And it's got a premium price. So you can save 15% if you use the code GRITTY and get yourself some meals. I prefer myself making half of my meals and then using Heather for the other half. And it works out well. That's about what my budget can take. Check that out. Lastly, go to sissysticks.com and get yourself some trekking poles. You save 15% with the code GRITTY. They're carbon uppers, aluminum lowers. They're super tough, and they get the job done. Each of these partners have been great to work with.
Right.
And we also have 2 others, Seek Outside shelters. You save 5% with Seek Outside. So if you're looking for, and they don't do sales or anything, so this is kind of a big deal for them to run the code with us. So if you're looking for those shelters that we've been using in the backcountry, check that out. And the titanium stoves, like I said, use the code GRITTY, save 5%. Some people have been watching our hunt films, and we've got the
Graxaw
game bags. And y'all asked about it back when we were doing our bear hunts and our mule deer hunts. And they're super lightweight game bags. Our buddy sells them at Graxaw.com. And if you use the code GRITTY, you save 10% off a set of game bags. Now, Lampers and I have been using them for a little over a year. So the bags weigh 6.2 ounces, and you can haul 240 pounds of meat in the bag. So they're perfect for boned out deer and elk. They're super tough as far as holding the weight and hanging them. They're not puncture resistant, so they're not for bones.
Right.
But for what we're doing, big expandable bags, they keep all the bugs. And, we were dealing with some hot temps with the bear hunts in the spring. We're able to fill them with bear meat and hang those bags. No fly blow could get in there, get on stuff. They're sealed tight, but they're breathable. They're legit. They're compact, super compact, like the size of a pop can. And yet you can carry 240 pounds of meat with them, and they're only 6 ounces. So they're pretty unique. Like I said, they're not for bones. You can puncture it pretty easily, but we didn't have that trouble, and we've reused them over and over again. They're a legit deal. So you can go to Gracksaw. It's GRAKKSAW, gracksaw.com, and use the code GRITTY and save 10%. Get yourself a set of bags. They're not cheap, but they're sweet.
Yep.
All right, let's dive into this show. The title of this article in Field and Stream is Wild Friendships, and you're going to find out why. David E. Petzal. He says, I met Norm Strung in November 1971 after he'd issued an invitation to staff members of the outdoor magazine for which I worked to hunt elk with him in Montana. He moved to Big Sky Country in 1959, put himself through college, taught college, and made a considerable name for himself as an outdoor writer. I had stayed in the East, gotten through college, joined the Army, taken an editing job, and was doing my damnedest to make a name for myself. I discovered on that hunt that one does not go after elk if one is flabby and short of wind. I also discovered I loved elk hunting, and Norm and I discovered that we were born only 45 minutes apart on the same day. The two of us communicated at an odd level. For long periods of time, we didn't speak at all. For example, during a 3.5-hour truck ride from Forsyth to Bozeman, one of us said, piss, and the other said, yeah. And that was the entire conversation for the trip. Other times, he'd start a sentence and I'd finish it, or vice versa. And so we hunted together, and we were friends for the next 20 years. Our bone of contention was smoking. I detested it, and Norm was a 3-pack-a-day man. The last time I ever saw him alive was when I came out in the late fall of 1990, and he looked awful. We had our usual argument. Those things are going to kill you, I said. Tobacco has been a good friend to me, he answered. But what neither of us knew was that Norm's good friend was already taking his life. In April, he was diagnosed with inoperable esophageal cancer. He was spared nothing. After a while, the morphine could no longer hold the pain at bay, and he had nothing to look forward to but a few more weeks of agony. So he got a revolver, walked to his favorite trout lie, and cut his suffering short. One of the lessons that life teaches is that you are obligated to go on. The next year, I was hunting in Colorado and watched a herd of elk far out of rifle range pouring through a clearing. It was more elk than Norm and I had seen in 2 decades of hunting, and I decided to tell him so. He didn't answer, but I thought he heard me. So I kept up the practice. Wherever I went with a rifle, I kept him updated. Just before Norm's good friend and neighbor, Sam Curtis, died of lung cancer in 2009 after 34 years of not smoking, he called to say goodbye. I wished him a good journey and said that when he found Norm to tell him to watch his backtrack because I would be catching up. Probably it's all sentimental foolishness. There are no listeners in the afterworld or post-departure messages to be given and received. But what else are we left with? This story was written on our 78th birthday. David E. Petzal. Yeah, it got a little dark there.
Yeah.
I guess, though, is it really? Because life is like that.
Right.
There are no guarantees, and at some point, your turn is going to be over.
Yep. We never know when that is.
I thought it was interesting because it made me think of my own childhood and my uncle and guys that I hunted with growing up, my dad, and how they brought me along. And they were young. They're like me at this point, in their mid-40s or late 30s, taking me along. And I was a kid, and then I got into high school and after, and they took me out. Now they're old dudes. They've had strokes. One has dementia. I was at the funeral one of my uncles, my Uncle Lloyd, I did go hunting with him a lot because he was probably the most dedicated. He just made it happen for weeks on end at some times, and we'd elk hunt and deer hunt. And as his nephew was always brought along, my dad was busy a lot, so I didn't get to go with my dad that often. My dad was mostly a bow hunter too, so we'd bow hunt, and then later I'd rifle hunt with my uncles.
Right.
And growing up with all that, I look back and I got to admit I felt a little melancholy lately, just because going and seeing family and at these funerals and seeing the passage of time, you can, it's written on their face. It just doesn't seem that long ago that they were out kicking the brush and climbing the mountains. Now they're having trouble remembering who I am. Right.
Like I said, you never know when that time's going to come. And like right now, I'm still very, very fortunate to be able to hunt with my dad, and he'll be 57 in April, and the sucker still goes like he's, I'd say 30 now, not 25 anymore. But I take advantage of those times because I don't know how long it's going to last. He hasn't been the easiest person on his body. He hasn't taken care of himself that way. He's in shape.
Yeah.
But he's had a hard life. Wrestling injuries to hunting injuries or just life, getting old. Like I said, he's no spring chicken anymore.
Yeah.
But you have to take advantage of those opportunities. And I'm forever grateful that he got me into the outdoors when I was a young little kid, I remember going with him and my grandpa and just spending that time with them and begging to go,
I have really fond memories of my time spent every hunting trip I ever went on.
Same here.
With my uncles, primarily my dad. I have such fond memories of those. Yep. And then the ones I did later with like my brother-in-law, Travis, to Prince of Wales Island, fond memories with Chad, my roommate from college, doing POW bear. And then some of just the elk hunts with Ben and Anthony,
right?
The blacktail tree stands, like all of this stuff. There is a bond that you create with people that you spend time with in the outdoors.
Absolutely.
You're away from distractions that are in the world, I guess.
Yep.
Combined with a little bit of hardship and suffering.
Yep.
And highs and lows.
You want to learn something about a person, go spend 3 or 4 days with just you and them in the outdoors, I mean, it's not always easy. The true personality will come out, I promise.
You find out who you like and who you don't real quick.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember, at the funeral just recently, I was there with a family friend who hunted with my uncle. My uncle and him were best of friends, and every year they would hunt together. And this gentleman, his name's Dennis Olson. He's your classic hunting addict. Like guns, tons and tons of guns, bird hunting, duck hunting, deer hunting, elk hunting. It didn't matter. Just hunting everything.
Right.
He just loves it. Loves being outside, loves the chase, and just happy to be there. And it's so fun to be in a camp like that with these guys that just live for this.
Yep.
You relate.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And that's just like our trip to Arizona,
Yep.
I mean, who you spend that camp with can make or break a hunt, and it's just those opportunities you always have to be forever grateful for, especially if they're good memories, good things happen, and the people you're with. But just, yeah. One
of my first hunts, early, when I was in high school, I went elk hunting with Ben and my cousin Jeff, my cousin Ben, and Dennis and Lloyd. And we were in Hell's Canyon, and they brought horses. My uncle had horses, and so we used horses for all the hunts and mostly for packing out. Right. But Uncle Lloyd has polio, or had polio as a youth, so his legs aren't the same. One's are shorter than the other, and it causes lots of problems, and he can get worn out quite a bit. Plus, he just didn't exercise all that hard to begin with, so he would ride into some hunt areas. And it'd be snow and pretty gnarly sometimes there in Hell's Canyon late season. We were hunting down there, and my cousin Ben, he's always been kind of rogue. You hunted.
Oh yeah,
Ben.
I love Ben. I love Ben.
Ben doesn't listen to anybody.
No,
and he does what he wants to do, and he just goes off. So, of course, he did. He just disappeared. And he ends up going out and shoots a bull elk. And he's like 16, I think, something like that. And we're in high school. He shoots it, and it falls off a cliff. And it's like a raghorn bull, right? But it falls, and its horns bust into like a ton of pieces, But he didn't care. He was like, I got an elk, And of course, the meat ended up being just fine. We had trouble getting the horses down there. And I remember being a 16, 17-year-old kid, like trying to load a pack and carry it up the hill. It was rough. We were very accustomed to hard work, So it was like, we got it done. But then we got it up on the horse. It was a relief. And then trying to get the horses out of there.
Right.
Out of Hell's
steep
Canyon.
Country.
In that steep country with a load. It was all kind of exciting. I remember I came back from that trip and was, back in school. And I was so grateful to Dennis for kind of helping me out and bringing me along. And I was getting ready to go on a mission from my church to Japan. Before I left, I don't know, I wanted to give him some memento. And so I took the horns that were busted from Ben's bull, and I took the horn and I fashioned it into a handle, and I made a knife for him with a leather sheath and stuff, and put it all together. And then I gave one to my dad and I gave one to Dennis. He always cherished it. And then when I saw him at the funeral this last weekend, we were talking, and we were having this full conversation. I realized that with dementia, he's there and then he's not.
Right.
And it was hard. It was hard to feel a loss. It's there's moments where he's there. Yeah. And there's a connection and everything, and then but I'll tell you, like, even in the midst of it, those moments where he's just excited about hunting and stories, and and then he forgets. But it's very easy to dwell on what's gone, and instead of being super grateful for the past and what it was, it's easy to dwell on how it's gone and be sad about it. But at the end of the day, the truth is, I try to swallow up that loss with gratitude.
Yeah. And you kind of growing up in the hunting industry, not industry, but hunting is a kid, you take for granted a lot of that stuff. It's just something that you did, versus a lot of people that as an adult get introduced into the hunting. They just don't take it for granted like we do, And I don't know. I should reflect a little more, I guess, on some of those moments, but because I remember as a 5-6-year-old kid begging my dad to go and telling him, like, hey, I promise I'll hike the whole time. And he knows the whole time that I'm going to end up packing my son out, but he never complained, let me go. And about probably 400 yards in, I'm holding on to his backpack, but from like 4 and 5, 6 years old, we started building those memories together. When my brother was with us, my sister, when she got a little older and stuff, but all through high school and through even before high school, I remember going with my dad and my grandpa, and it's kind of the same area we hunted this year for elk, or you did, I grew up traipsing across those hills as like an 8-year-old kid, seeing some giant bulls, at the time, and that was 20-some years ago. You think about it, but time goes fast.
It does. I will say this, no, there are no guarantees. You could have an accident or something can happen to you anytime. But I've always felt like with the time I have, I want to be disciplined with my health and my wellness. Yeah. And actually, it's not a sacrifice.
No.
It feels good to eat well. I like healthy food.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It takes a bit to break the cycle, though. If you're eating McDonald's and you're drinking soda, I think that produces some addictions, man.
Yeah.
Some.
Yep. And like me on the road a lot. The last 2 years, I'm not perfect by any means.
Because how old are you, Brad?
I'm 31. Be 32.
You're at that stage where all the crap you got away with,
I'm not getting away with it anymore.
Starting like as of maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah.
It's just not
and
the same.
I've kind of noticed, like I said, I'm not perfect. I'll have a meal like that every now and then, because on the road it is tough sometimes.
Yeah.
But I've noticed, especially because I go play basketball a lot when I'm at home and run or whatever, just trying to be active. And I noticed if there's a week that I did eat like even 2 kind of junk meals, I'll notice that when I go back home to play basketball. It's like I'm breathing hard, and it's like, what the heck, Versus if I try and stay pretty healthy as far as eating clean, big difference. Just in a few days,
Yeah.
And I'm getting better at eating a lot more healthy. That's for sure. Then it kind of leads into being able to go to some places like my dad and I have been, and my brother. If you're kind of out of shape and stuff, or if I was, we'd probably never made it to those places.
Yeah.
I never would have made those memories.
Yeah.
And
tell me about an experience before you were old enough to hunt, a hunt that you went on that, just imprinted on your memory forever.
so one of them is actually same area that we went archery hunting this year. I was 8, and my grandpa ended up killing a 5-point bull, but my dad's cousin, who was still lived over there, still hunted that area, told my grandpa, said, hey, because my grandpa drew a rifle bull tag, and he said, hey, there's 2 bulls that I've been watching all year that never got with cows, but they're 2 giants.
Yeah.
And so I remember how excited my dad was to get my grandpa there, because he's like, I know where he's talking. And so I remember from the chance, and so my grandpa actually had like a little cabin, a family cabin that we all used to go to, and everybody would deer hunt out of it and stuff. Yeah. I remember going on that hunt, and I remember the first day, it was like the 3rd day there, but the first time we actually saw one of those big bulls. And there are very few bulls that I'm like really excited about,
Yeah.
And I remember plain as day that bull. And we're hiking up the hill. It's foggy, raining. My grandpa wore glasses.
You're 8 years old.
I'm 8 years old, and I will never forget this. So I didn't have any hunting clothes back then. I'm wearing a jean jacket, jean coat jacket, because it's raining and wet. And we're hiking up, and I remember my dad turns back around and looks down the hill, and he goes, there's a bull. And he gets looking at it, and sucker's like 300 yards away, 250, 300 yards away, and he's just this giant bull. And I remember my grandpa pulling up, and he can't see because his glasses are fogged up. Because it's raining, we're sweating walking up the hill. And I remember my grandpa like trying to adjust his glasses. My dad's like, you better shoot. That bull's going to go. You better shoot, And I'm over there just fascinated by this giant bull, because I've never seen a bull that big, and I'm young. And my grandpa cracks a couple shots off and stuff and made that bull swap ends and stuff, but never hit him. We hiked all the way back down, and that was my first chance to really learn how to maybe track some blood or something, you know. But he just, I'll never forget that day. And I'm like, man. But,
that's rough.
Yep. That's just one of them.
I had an experience. I don't remember how old I was, probably around 9 or 10, similar age as you. And my Uncle Lloyd and my cousin Jeff, we were the same age, cousin Jeff and I. My uncle, he was going hunting, deer hunting, and Ben was going hunting with his dad. They were all going hunting to the same spot. My dad couldn't go, and I was kind of bummed because I wanted to get out and hunt. Right. I wanted to go on these adventures too. And so my 2 uncles were going with their sons, and we all lived out on the same land together. We all grew up on acreage out there in Oregon City. Well, my grandpa was like, he just could tell I wanted to go and wasn't going to be able to go. And he said, well, why don't you come with me? And my uncles, they were really generous about bringing me along, but we were pretty young at this stage. And so it's like dragging one kid behind you and dragging another kid behind you.
It's a lot of work.
And so my grandpa said, I'm going to go and you're going to come with me. So my grandpa Joe and I got in the car with him, and we went on this hunt together. And my Uncle Lloyd and Jeff and Ben and his dad. So there was 3 of them and myself. So we drive out there. It was like Eastern Oregon, and we're hunting deer. And I just remember they're driving down the road, and they're all in each a different car, or I think they were in like some kind of Ford Bronco in the front. And so my grandpa, we're there in a Volkswagen Rabbit. So, and it's this Volkswagen Rabbit that has one of those seat belts that when you close the door, it automatically
shuts or
the seat belt, comes up and goes over the door and locks in. So whenever you try to get out, it
takes a minute.
Yeah. And then if you unbuckle it, it beeps at you the whole time. So we're kind of like more or less road hunting, driving down the road on these dirt roads. And a couple of times, a buck would present, like run across the road and stand there, and he's trying to get out of the seat, and he's waiting for the seatbelt to come down, and he can't get out quick. And then he unbuckles it, and then it's beeping the whole time as we're driving down the road. Right. So he's getting pissed off, and my grandpa can get pretty mad. I did a podcast with him once. He's on here, and anyone who heard that podcast, you can tell he's a salty dude. So we're driving down the road, and like 3 bucks jump up with a bunch of does, and they start running across this flat. Well, my grandpa swings open the door, and he goes to climb out, and he's stuck because of the seatbelt, and he's had it. And he pulls this knife out. I don't know really where it came from, and he cut the seatbelt. Then he leans over the car, boom, and he shoots this deer, dumps it on the run, And I was like, my grandpa's cool,
right.
like here he is just, and I couldn't believe he cut the seatbelt. Like I was like, whoa, you're not, I don't know if you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And made an imprint on me. And then we walked over there to the deer, and my uncle had shot one that wasn't a kill shot.
Right.
It was like a spine shot. So it was on the ground. We got over to it, and I remember being young and seeing the animal suffering and kind of dragging its back end. And my grandpa pulled the gun up and shot it and dispatched it, and I remember being like, you see death for the first time.
Yeah.
Up close.
Yep.
It's one thing to shoot it and have it drop at 200 yards. It's another, to actually be there staring it in the eyes.
Yeah. And I remember, luckily with my grandpas, I'd been around other kills and stuff with my dad, but probably, deer and things like that. But I remember my grandpa, and I still remember the picture, like my parents have at their house, and it's this 5-point bull. And I'm sitting right with my grandpa, and I can't remember if I had a red flannel, one of those old red flannel, like flap hats or whatever. Or I think there's somebody has one on in the picture or whatever. But another memory from that, kind of the same hunt or just going to that same area as the cabin they had, there was always pack rats in the top of that cabin. And I remember there was a little hole in the top of the ceiling. Mm-hmm. You'd be laying in bed. Nobody wanted to sleep on the top bunk or whatever because the pack rats would always come and lean over and look at you,
I hate pack rats.
I know.
I hate them.
But that was just another memory from being a kid, getting out in the outdoors.
Well, this article in Field and Stream, I did appreciate it. It makes you think, right? Like, I often think things like cigarettes, a vice like that, is it worth trading in 20, 30 years of your time here,
right,
for that indulgence? And usually all that thing does is make you feel like crap in the long run anyway.
Yep.
You have to start using more of it just to feel normal.
Yep. And even not smoking and stuff, you're not guaranteed anything in life,
Exactly. Like he mentions this guy being, not smoking for more than 34 years. He still gets lung cancer.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that at the end here where he said it's all sentimental foolishness. There are no listeners in the afterworld or post-departure messages to be given and received. Depends on what you believe.
Right. Exactly.
Because I'm not sure if they're listening all the time, but I believe in a higher something.
Same here.
I just, for some reason, that just makes more sense to me.
Yep.
I was reading another podcast I'm doing here soon is on David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And at the very end of the book, he talks about, look, man, I believe in something. Mm-hmm. I believe that when I'm in those dark hours and, they say there's no atheist in a foxhole, I just feel like talking to God, believing in a higher being, there's something about it that feels right.
Yep.
It's just me. It's just me. So I talk to those people I've lost.
Same here. And I just hope there's hunting in heaven.
Yeah, it's heaven.
It's going to be happy heaven.
It's got to have
shoot
something.
You get to see the deer, but he doesn't die. He keeps going. You get another chance at it. No,
it's an interesting idea on the whole universe thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it just feels like there's something to all of this.
And in those hard times, you always talk to those maybe not so hard times, but in the hard times, it almost feels like when you turn to that
Mm-hmm.
you always seem to kind of get an answer, and a comfort to me anyway,
Yeah.
And
Well, I think I always say this. I think you can go through life thinking that nothing you do really matters, and it's not really important, because this is just it anyway.
right.
And then there's no cosmic significance to anything you do.
Right.
Whether you lie or tell the truth doesn't really matter.
Yep.
Whether you live a good life or a crappy life, it's all just a cosmic joke anyway.
Exactly.
Or you can go through it believing like there's something out there. It really does matter, and everything you do matters.
Yep.
And if it does matter, then you have some responsibility.
Exactly.
You have a proper way to put yourself in the world today and act.
Yep.
And if you have that, figured out, it's like, well, there's responsibility, but then everything you do is meaningful.
Right. Exactly. You have
There-
a purpose.
There is some purpose, and so, So there you have it. Kindred spirit. Long after their last adventure together, the author still speaks to his late elk hunting partner. It's cathartic.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yep.
Anyway, those relationships we forge in the wild, they're awesome.
Yeah.
They're forever.
You're making a memory of lifetimes. And like right now, I'm starting to get my 6-year-old more and more in the outdoors because he is old enough and capable to kind of go on some of those easier things with me, And we went out just on a quick trip last week when I was home, and he told me it was going to be boring. So my wife's like, don't force him to go, And that morning at 5 o'clock when I got up, I pulled him out of bed and I was like, hey, bud, let's go. And he's like, well, I don't want to go. It's going to be boring. So let's just get in the truck. Let's go. And we went with one of my friends from our ward. And we got up there and right out of the truck, took off running through the sagebrush, and I've got video of him, like, as we're walking back, he's whistling out by himself, And so I asked him when we got back, I'm like, was it boring, buddy? He's like, no, I had a lot of fun, Dad. I'm like, there you go, and just sometimes you got to push them to get into those things. It might not come to them naturally.
I agree. People following our gritty films, they saw Caitlin out hunting with Brock and Anthony for elk, and she's been on a lot of hunts with me and just hunt outdoor backpacking trips. Right. And for Caitlin, these adventures, I think they have forged in her mind, the same kind of memories you and I have, just these experiences, cutting up an elk, seeing one harvested, packing it out, eating it, like the whole package. She's been on these adventures. She's done hard things. She's had to climb those mountains, and they look big from the bottom, but those things are going to be in her mind forever, just like the memories I have of the uncles and those with my dad. Those experiences, they're precious. They don't go away. So get your own kids out, get other buddies out, take them on some trips. I took my friend from work years ago. He's from England,
right?
And he has never hunted before. And he came out here and hunted elk with me and Ben a couple years back. And I called a bull into like 10 yards, with his bow in hand. And he's just like, the backpacking and the adventure out there was it was just like, he was in it. He was doing it. And it's something that I absolutely take for granted because I've done it so many times. Just what you do. And for him, it was all new. It was pretty cool. And we still are in touch all the time. And I think that made a big impression on his life, and I'm glad it did. I hope it did, because these outdoor experiences are special, and we take them for granted.
Yep. And I encourage people too, like even myself, and I'm trying to get better at it. Is if somebody is interested in hunting, take them. Don't take them to your favorite spot. But take them.
I know. And we all struggle with the old...
And everybody does. Like you want to keep that to yourself, but for hunting to continue on, like we have to, I think, teach and educate those that don't hunt but still are somewhat interested.
Yeah.
Kind of like a kid. You might have to encourage them a little bit, and once you get them out there, then they have those experiences.
And then they can do it on their own as well.
Exactly.
Like you teach a man to fish.
Yep.
So, all right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Get out there and make your own memories. No one's going to remember how many hours you spent at work.
Right.
That's why I pulled Caitlin out of school and took her hunting. she's going to have few memories of being in school or doing, her math homework. But the time she spent in the mountains with us chasing elk, that's going to stick there forever.
Exactly.
I can distinctly remember all my hunting experiences at that age. I have almost no memories of the days in high school.
Just remember the goof around days, which was every day
I
for
remember
me.
sports,
Yeah.
but I can't remember.
Because you had a passion for it a little
classroom. It's because I'm 45 now. Give it another 15 years, you're not going to remember either, Brad.
bit. Yeah. Dang.
Maybe. I don't know. All right, folks. Again, thanks for tuning in. And as always, stay gritty.